Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tortoise. Welcome to our Monday Night Thinking with Greg James. I'm Merope Mills. I'm a partner and editor at Tortoise. I'm really pleased about this one because one of my colleagues just privately messaged me and said, try not to look so excited, you're a professional. So obviously, I'm very overexcited for a Monday night. Before we get started with Greg James, the radio DJ, TV presenter, children's book writer, cricket lover, I should tell you the rules of a thinking if you haven't been here before. I am a professional, thank you, Liz. So it's not a one-on-one event. It's not me talking to Greg, just asking him my questions for an hour. I want you to get involved, and there are two ways you can do that. You can write in the chat where my colleague Liz Mosley is. Liz, look, your camera's off, but can you give us a little wave to show that you're there? There she is. There's Liz, and she's going to be in chat, ready to talk to you there. Or you can raise your hand, and you do that by hovering over the participants at the bottom of the screen, or click on that and a list of names comes up, and at the bottom there's a little tab where you can raise your hand, and if you do that I will come to you and you can make your point or ask a question or whatever you like, just like my colleague Katie Vanek Smith is doing now. I don't think she wants to ask a question, I think she's demonstrating. So Greg, thank you so much for joining us on your holiday. If anyone listens to Radio 1, they'll know that it's actually Greg's holiday. He wasn't in this morning. And I just want to start by asking you about what your lockdown's been like, because I think I read James Purnell, director of radio, saying at the BBC, saying 90% of staff, radio staff, are working from home. And I think you have been presenting from your front room. In fact, I know you have, because I saw a little interview you did with Chris Martin, where you were sort of in the middle of doing a quiz with him, and then your doorbell went and your dog started barking. Your dog Barney, who's right next to you, started barking, and I thought, this is the perils of radio at home. But what's it been like?
Well, actually, good evening, everybody, first of all. Yeah, so the Radio 1 show, actually, we've been doing it from the studio. We've been going in every day since lockdown started, and it was a really wild time. I mean, for everyone, for the world, it was weird. And we found it strange to have to completely repurpose that show for a pandemic, because there's no manual. It's not like, turn to page 8 for pandemic guidance. It was like, how do you do a breakfast show or like a fun show during a pandemic? So we had to reversion that. The stuff I was doing at home, actually, that was a really rare moment where we did a pre-recorded interview with Chris Martin, and he was only available in LA time. So we had to do it from like my house in the evening and then recorded it for the next day. I did my Radio 4 show Rewinder from the floor in the living room, because it didn't really need any interaction or anything, sort of live interaction. But the breakfast show is nothing without live interaction and people calling in and volunteering stupid stories and whatever, and reacting. So we didn't really see a way that we could do it from home and it still be any good.
Every morning you've gone in, even in the early days, you were in
very,
very early with all your sort of colleagues trying to bring the fun.
So it was a real gradual, it was a gradual sort of decay of the production staff. So just the week before lockdown, it was a bit like, oh, we shouldn't shake hands anymore. Not that we shake hands every morning or anything. Good morning. But and then it took like a week later, we scaled back everyone in the office. And then the week after that, we scaled back all the staff on the show. So it's just one producer and one presenter, but we were separated by glass. So I was just in the studio on my own, a bit like an episode of Frasier. So like Roz was producing and I was in the studio, which is quite a weird experience because I'm used to having lots of people running in with like, oh, how about this bit or whatever. So it's been quite a strange, solitary experience, but obviously not anything like as stressful as sort of having to do a medical job. But it felt like a very good service we were doing to the listeners. Very early on, we thought, oh, the listeners are really responding to how we're doing this show, being very honest about our feelings and getting callers on and saying just the words, I'm scared, or this is a bit terrifying, but let's all kind of muck in. So really, it was a very stressful couple of weeks and very uncertain in terms of how do you do a show during a pandemic, but it became quite apparent that fun stuff was needed and silly things were being lapped up. And actually we've seen that more listeners than ever have kind of emailed in or embraced it or gone, oh, I've got a funny thing to add, or put me on, or I can do a stupid game with you. Because I suppose when everyone's feeling sad and a bit bleaked out, then silly distractions and stupid games with bad theme tunes are quite a good tonic.
Absolutely, stupid games with bad theme tunes is one of the things I'm going to come to in a second, because I feel that is like your trademark. But do you think, you know, you could bring more fun because everyone was so anxious and stressed? Like, your role was bigger than ever. Did you see ratings go up?
Well, it's hard to know, because the Radar, the sort of the Radar way of doing it was
behind,
because obviously you don't want people going door to door saying, excuse me, could you tell me when you last listened to Radio 4? You know, like, you piss off, as a pandemic on. But the BBC, the app, Sounds app, has seen increased listenership. But I mean, I obviously do sort of care about that, but it's more of a feeling of like people are really engaged with the show.
I know you do TV work as well, and I know it's not a competition between TV and radio, but you love radio. And do you think radio brings something at this kind of time that TV can't?
Yeah, well, I'm very biased towards radio, and I like some of the stuff I've done on TV, but nothing ever comes close to the feeling of having a sort of a blank canvas essentially at the start of the morning, and you just have to do something, otherwise nothing happens. There's a real sort of a panic of, if we don't come up with something good, then there will be nothing on this show today. So I've never really found TV as exciting or as spontaneous or as live or lively as a radio show. So yeah, definitely. Well, radio's always been the most amazing companion to people, and particularly when I was growing up, it was my group of friends. It's not my only group of friends, but like my thing. And I was like, oh, I like these people because they're like my friends, and I know exactly what they think on a certain thing. Or you turn on and be like, oh my god, I can't wait to hear what Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant got to say about what happened this week, because I used to do an XFM show which I was addicted to on a Saturday afternoon. And there's something about it being a companion that has really been I guess remembered by a few people, but it's been magnified. The power of it has been magnified over the last few months in particular, because it's a sense of normality. And you might not really think about it when you're just going about normal non-pandemic routine, but I think when everything is falling down around us, people have relied on it and gone, oh yeah, that's a really used that, and I didn't realize that I relied on it so much. So we've certainly felt that there's been a huge amount of positive feeling towards live radio shows. And that's not just Radio 1, that's across loads of different stations who do those live, I guess, presenter-led entertainment shows.
Quite a few people in the chat saying they've listened to more live radio than podcasts since the pandemic. So they're feeling more, makes them feel more connected.
Yeah, because that's exactly it. Being connected is exactly the thing. And that's what we actually said quite blatantly on the first few shows of the lockdown. I said, look, don't, just because we are alone doesn't mean you have to be lonely, which I guess is quite cheesy and sounds a bit like a Coldplay lyric, but it's the sentiment is true. I think I still believe that every day on the show, is that you don't have to, even if you're not face to face with someone, hearing what's going on in the world, or hearing that other people are struggling, going on dates, or they just met up with someone and they can't see them now for 3 months. Those sorts of stories are really relatable.
I can see a hand up. It's from my colleague Tessa Murray, so I'm going to go to her before I ask you my next stuff.
Okay.
Sorry, Mary. Hello. I was just going to be really cheesy, and I'm not going to sing it. I'm just going to say it. What's your unpopular lockdown opinion?
That's one of my questions.
We should talked before. Sorry.
I think do you know what? I wondered if everyone has asked you everyone must have asked you what your unpopular opinion is.
Yeah,
Would you,
boring question. I asked it first.
Okay, my unpopular lockdown opinion is I think everyone looks better with longer hair.
Show it again. Show your locks.
No, I don't necessarily mean me. I mean, but I've got a pea head, so anything to sort of puff out the head, I think is good, and you can quote me on that. But I think loads of people who were putting photos up on Saturday are like, "Hey, got my hair done." I go, "Yeah, you look worse. You shouldn't have done that." you can see I've got a weird shaped head as well, so it really sort of distracts from that. So that's my down unpopular opinion.
Okay, and what about your general unpopular opinion? Because I would like to say that there was last week you did a really funny one. Was it? No, when was it? With your other DJs, with your fellow Radio 1 DJs.
Oh yeah, so my favourite one that we had on that segment. So Clara Amfo did that she thinks that Mr. Brightside should never ever be played again on Radio 1, which it's hard to argue with that, I'd say.
Alice Levine said, I don't think anybody wants an after party.
Yeah. Alice Levine's one was great. She said, I don't ever want to go to an after party. And then Grimmy sort of chimed in and said, oh, you don't want to go to the party, let alone the after party. So that was fun. My one, I've got a couple. I did one last week, which was about the Avengers films. And although they're really good fun, and I'm not a massive fan of them, but I think they're fun. My unpopular opinion is that they waste all the people in it. They completely waste the opportunity of having those amazing actors. So they've got Jennifer Lawrence, and they've got, I know it's the X-Men films, but Jennifer Lawrence, and they've got Michael Fassbender, and what's Last King of Scotland guy, what's his name? James McAvoy. And they're sort of unrecognisable, and they're either painted blue or under a mask. You're like, well, why have you spent millions and millions of pounds on these people? There's no point. So I think that's one of mine. My other one is that I think that Will Smith's best role, the best performance he's ever given, was in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh, interesting.
Great performance.
I don't think, not even Men in Black, it doesn't cut it.
Not that it's not good, but I just think he was discovered. They said, you're going to act in this, you're going to be amazing, just be natural. It's his most natural. He's warm, he's funny. It was like completely unaware. Just an amazing, amazing thing. There you go.
I think that's a good unpopular opinion. This is one of the things I want to ask you. So unpopular opinion, obviously genius. All your escape rooms where everyone believes you've really been abducted, and you get your wife Bella and everyone else in on it. Your panpipe games, mascot. How do you come up with this stuff again and again? All your sort of silly fun.
Well,
what's the process?
I have a brilliant team of people that I've assembled, my own Avengers, who are without masks or blue paint, and I guess we're just all like-minded in that we like silly things, and we like to challenge ourselves, and I guess confidence is the key to that show, because if you approach any of those ideas without confidence, they can just fall on their ass and be really naff and essentially come across as like Alan Partridge features. And so it's all in the cell of it, I guess. So you have to believe that they're going to be funny or silly, or they're going to work. So I guess we just approached it with, let's just have some fun with this radio station that we've been given, this breakfast show, which has got a huge audience that was just sort of waiting for you. And like, well, let's just do something that people remember. I guess that's kind of it. I know that might sound a bit high and mighty, but it's just nice to have things that people remember and bring up, and they go, oh my God, they found you then. And like when that happened, we did the escape room or the hide and seek thing. Like the next week, when I was walking around just down the high street, someone was like, oh, they found you then. I'm like, oh my God, right, it worked. So people bought into it and they heard the thing. So I suppose it's that, and that's always been my favorite sort of radio, has been event radio. So yes, it's great to have 5 in a row sometimes, but nobody remembers 5 in a row. You know what I mean? So that's sort of how we approached that show. And we were just given, amazingly, they just gave us the keys to the breakfast show. They're like, go on, see what happens. And we were just very lucky, I think. I've been lucky in many ways that I got the breakfast show at a time when I felt like I was sort of old enough and confident enough to do it, and I knew what I wanted to do. But they let us just do stuff. And when the first thing happened, which was Pass the Pasty, which is as stupid as it sounds, they went, okay, well done, that seemed to work. So
I think you explained that you needed to get a pasty from Land's End to John O'Groats. That was right, wasn't it?
Yeah, well,
up the country.
it was a listener called Sarah who had never had, we were talking about things that you'd never done. Like, it was because Michael Owen had done an interview where he said, I've never had a cup of tea in my life. So then that started a thing of, what have you never done? And it was someone in Aberdeenshire called Sarah who had never had a pasty in her life. And so we got a real Cornish pasty. We were like, okay, let's get her a pasty. And then Will, my producer, I think, said, well, how about we get the listeners to do it as a sort of relay, like the Olympic torch passing. So we essentially had this pasty passed between the listeners from Padstow all the way to Newmarket in Aberdeenshire. And it took a week. And it was our second week on the breakfast show. And I remember just looking around and chatting with the team, and I was like, if this doesn't come off, we're going to look like the biggest bunch of bellends ever. And luckily it did, and it was really, because it was so stupid that it worked, because no one else, I mean, Capital weren't doing that. And so it was like, well, that's kind of it. Do what Capital and Heart can't / won't do. And that's, in a way, a sort of a jumping off point for lots of our
public
ideas.
service broadcasting at its best.
But
I
also,
want to say to the people who want to talk about cricket, I promise you're going to come to cricket.
Nice.
It's going to come. But I can see a couple of hands up. Wait, before we go to the hands, Adam says he's got a boring question he wants to ask you. Does Roisin press her own buttons for the news?
Roisin Hasty, the newsreader, presses her own buttons, yes.
There you go, Adam.
So do I, so we all press our own buttons, and that's one thing that actually people don't quite compute, I don't think, sometimes. They're like, when you hear a thing go off, it's because I pressed it. I think I know that's odd, but a lot of people haven't seen inside a radio studio, so I think that's what I'm saying. I want to add quickly to the pasty stuff, and to answer that question, is that all of that stuff comes from listeners. So in a way, because we empower the listeners to come up with the stuff for the show. So you have a sort of get out clause, which is, well, you asked for this, so it's kind of your fault if it doesn't work. But that's the spirit of the show, is I've got a terrible idea, might work, and the listeners will go, oh, I've got an idea about this. So it's very much everyone's able to have their moment on the show, I suppose.
And I think it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, because you always sound like you're having such fun doing it. Which but
the process of it is often funnier. Anyway,
exactly.
Sometimes, like the actual moment where she got the pasty, we're a bit like, okay, great. But the journey is more than the destination for that sort of thing.
Okay, I've got 3 hands up. I'm going to go to Sophie, Jessamy, and then is it Daphne? I hope so. Anyway, in that order. Hello, Sophie.
Hi.
Hi.
So this is a bit of a boring question, but I'm interested in getting into radio. What would you best suggest as a path for me to go into? So I've just left college from doing a BTEC in business.
Great. Do you do any radio at the moment? Do you do any community radio or did you do student radio or anything like that?
No, we didn't have any opportunities like that, and I don't really know how to do it without, I guess, going through like BBC or something when applying to like work experience.
Yeah, well, BBC local stations are really good in terms of teaching you the BBC ways and sort of learning how to do bits of editing and bits of production and working on how to sort of shape a show. So that's how I started. When I was at university in Norfolk, I went to BBC Norfolk. I mean, it's the most partridge upbringing ever, really. But local BBC radio is very good for that sort of thing, and they often will just let you look around, and then they might give you a couple of shifts or whatever. I started doing work experience on. I started doing let me say something cliche, but I started doing the phones on a football phone in called Canary Call, which happened after the end of every Norwich City match. So it was great to be around all the presenters and see how they did shows and just be immersed in that environment. I also did hospital radio, which is still a big thing, which you can just get some experience of learning the basics of talking up to the vocals and that kind of stuff. But community radio is enormous, and there will be a community radio station near you that would probably offer you some stuff. But sort of wider, broader things that you could do. I mean, if I was starting out now and if I was your age, I would 100% be doing a podcast, or even if it wasn't published anywhere, I would do it just for the practice and get yourself a microphone and interview some people or come up with a little format with you and your friends, which you never know might become a huge thing. That's how some of the biggest podcasts have become massive. Like Alice Levine, we mentioned her earlier. So Alice Levine and Jamie and James my dad wrote a porno, and that was just a very small idea which was recorded literally at their kitchen table, and now has become a global successful podcast.
Yeah.
So I've always said this about radio and these sorts of jobs, that there are loads of ways of getting in, but also scarily there are loads of ways, there are maybe too many ways of getting in. There's no set path. So I would say just keep doing radio and putting shows together and recording your stuff and getting better at it, but also making sure that you listen to a lot of output. Podcasts, every radio station, you should have some sort of at least a surface knowledge of what they all do, so that you know where everything fits in. Because if you don't know where everything fits in, how are you going to know what to go for? So that's part of the job, is to be nerdy about it, I guess, and know who does the Radio 3 breakfast show, or what podcasts the Times do, or Tortoise or whatever. So you should know about all those bits. So just be a big nerd about it, would be my advice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessamy.
Hello.
A young listener.
Hello.
Hi.
With many, many books behind. How many of those have you read?
Probably about 3.
Great.
So I have 2 questions for you.
Yes.
The first one is, what is your biggest pet peeve? And the second one is, if you could have any dressing up costume in the whole wide world, what would it be?
What would this destroy question 2 if I was to say that fancy dress parties are my biggest pet peeve? No, look. So I really like dressing up in silly things. So I think that's fine. I think the stress and pressure of a fancy dress party gets too much for me, I would say. But let me give you a better answer. What would my costume be? I really enjoy the costumes that look like you're sitting on top of a big bird. I find those. I've always found those funny, and I still find those funny. So you can sort of pretend like you're on the bird, and but you are also the bird. And my biggest pet peeve: YouTubers that start every video with "Hey guys." It's like a radio presenter. One of my biggest pet peeves on the radio is when you hear people say, "How are you?" And it's like, we're not going to drive around being like, "I'm fine, thanks." Like, it's not. That's not. I don't understand that. So that's my thing. So hey guys,
I like the bird costume.
Welcome to my channel. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Jessamy. Exactly.
Okay, but and I've got a very important slide I need to put up in a second. I'm going to go to David first, and then the next. I can see 3 more hands up. Hello, is it
David?
Am I saying your name right?
David.
David.
Hello. Hi, Greg.
Hi.
I just thought I'd ask you a question with a little bit of backstory to it. I have started to run my school's radio station again.
Nice.
In school. So as the lockdown started, I thought, well, what could be the best thing for me to help everybody keep in touch in school? And I started we had a studio going, but there was nothing coming out of it. So I restarted our school radio, and then I started doing breakfast shows from home.
Great.
From there, I've gone on to do a slot on my local community radio. And I was wondering, in terms of content, if you were given the kind of position I'm in, which is I'll be going back to doing school as well as community radio in September, how do you think you would come up with ideas to interact with the pupils and the staff at school? Because during the lockdown shows we had, there was a staff member that sent me a voice note of a joke every morning, which I reluctantly played out every morning. And that worked quite well. And I was just wondering, how do you think is the best way to get access to more of those? Thank you.
Great idea. Well, a school is such a rich tapestry of stuff. I mean, definitely embarrassing teachers would be something that I would go for. I guess also you could essentially run it, you could do phone-ins, but you would do essentially the callers as pre-recorded. So you could actually, you could get them to, you could speak to them before the show or the day before the show. Yeah. Therefore, that's a good way of getting voices on. They don't have to be live voices. For example, this might break the illusion. Unpopular opinion isn't live. Because,
whoa!
Well, it's too complicated to do. You wouldn't be able to do it. Like, you couldn't rely on every component working. There's no benefit to it being live. So there's ways of doing it. So I'd say pre-recording would be your friend with this, and you could go around. Obviously, maybe you couldn't do so much face to face, but you could do, I don't know, an interview with a teacher in their garden, or like you could go around and do something. Please don't necessarily use that idea; it might be terrible. Yeah. But there are things that you could do where you could sort of stack up bits of content and play them out on the show that don't have to rely on being live and have loads of people interacting the whole time. Another thing you could do is maybe a sort of an email questionnaire to lots of students, and then the responses could form part of a discussion. You know, you could have sort of polls on certain things, like what's your favorite thing you've been doing in lockdown, and that can sort of bring up talking points and stuff. So I'd say there are lots of ways of doing it without having to rely on everything coming in live to the show. Does that help at all? It's silent.
I'm going to say, I think it's brilliantly helpful. I'm going to go to my important slide in just 1 second. Actually, well, I'll go to some names first. Okay, full disclosure, I'm going to go to the name that is at the top of the list, which says Paul Leahy. And I think in terms of honesty, I need to say, this is my daughter who's sitting downstairs. And then I'm going to go to Sarah Jane.
Okay.
Paul Leahy. There you are. Hello, daughter.
Hello.
Hi there.
So my question is, when you first started the breakfast show, did you get nervous, and how did you cope with that nervousness?
I felt like I was going to explode with nerves the night before and the morning of, and then 10 minutes beforehand, but then a minute beforehand, as the news was finishing, there was an extraordinary sort of wash of calm which happened, and I've actually never experienced it before, where I just went, I can do it, I can do this. And because we prepared loads of stuff, I'd thought about it for such a long time, and I just thought, do you know what, what's the worst that can happen? I'm just going to go and have some fun. And I guess it was all of the practicing from when I was a kid doing hospital radio and all the rest of it. I was like, I know I can do this. This is my fun thing that I know that I can do. Not everyone maybe will not like, people might not like it, but this is the thing that I'm confident of. And again, it was the confidence thing of the whole show. My team were amazing. I knew I had their backing. I had the backing of Radio 1. I felt like the DJs were sort of willing me on. And so the nerves kind of fell away, which was incredible. And then that 3.5 hours of that first show was probably the happiest I've ever been on the radio. Bella, not in real life, on the radio. And the first show was a complete dream, and I feel really lucky, and I feel very... I remember
that week, because they put at the Piccadilly Circus, they had, what did they have? Massive picture of you all over Piccadilly Circus saying, what did it say? Don't mess it up, Greg, or something like that.
Yeah, that was really proud of that campaign, actually, because that was... the BBC marketing team just said, well, why don't we do something that's not classically BBC? And they were like, well, what sort of thing would it be? And we were like, well, what's the truth? What's the actual true feeling that I can tap into and that the listeners can understand? They understand that it's a big job. And what do people always say? They was like, don't get up. So we're like, well, what's the BBC version of that? And it was, don't blow it, Greg. So that was, I guess it was sort of risky, because if it had gone wrong on that first show, then it would have been like, well, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. But yeah, that first show was really plain sailing, and we were very confident with what we had, and we launched Unpopular Opinion, which landed really well. We had Calvin Harris on talking about doing gardening, and our first guest was a lion from Blackpool Zoo. And I feel like the spirit of the show was immediately set out. So if people didn't like that spirit of it, then they would have realised it wasn't for them. But the second show was a nightmare. It was awful. We hadn't prepared anything, and it wasn't fun, or there was no adrenaline because I'd done all the stuff on the first show. And like, oh, I'll do it again now. To the point now where I felt, because they launched Times Radio, didn't they, a couple of weeks ago, and I actually felt bad for them on Monday night because they'd had the big launch on Monday, and I was like, they're gonna really feel it tomorrow. It's one of the saddest days you're gonna have. The day after the launch is the worst day. Anyway.
Thank you, daughter. Off you go.
I just saw someone commenting on the chat saying, isn't the idea of saying, how are you, to build a community and make it feel like it's conversational? Yes, but I think there's much better ways of doing it. That's what I'd say. I think you can have a chat with the listeners without asking them to fill in the blanks. I think that's my point. It's just a personal thing for me.
I'm going to go to Sarah Jane now. Is it Sarah Jane Shaw?
Hi, thanks. Hi. So you've spoken before about Terry Wogan being a big influence, and I think we can certainly see as an audience that there are lots of ways in which you emulate him in the way you're very personable, you're very open, often very vulnerable, and that you share a lot of personal opinions that really connected with the audience. But I just wonder how you balance that with working for an organisation like the BBC that's famously non-partisan, when you've got strong opinions, popular or otherwise. Whether you've had experience of that, particularly during lockdown, where politically you might sit in a different space. How do you balance that out?
Yeah, it is tricky, I guess, but my job is quite clear, which is to do entertaining stuff and to talk about, I guess, what we're all going through. Difficult around big political moments. I mean, we've had lots of loud ones in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, Brexit, Trump, and now this huge pandemic. So it's definitely difficult, but I have to remember that people aren't listening to me for that. And that isn't, I mean, it's literally not allowed for me to do that. And I think that's a great thing. But you can also promote sort of togetherness and community and kindness and all that through silly stuff. So I don't see it as a huge barrier. I see it actually as it's a good challenge, because that's not, my job isn't to go on air and sound off about a politician or a policy, and thank God it isn't, because I wouldn't know really what to do. But I think what we all at Radio 1 are good at is gauging the zeitgeisty moments, for the want of a better, more underused phrase, but using the stories of the day to reflect everything and to sum up the day and sum up the national feeling. So it's definitely difficult at times, because you just want to go on and sort of talk literally about the Dominic Cummings story or something, but there's always a funny take on stuff. But we don't shy away from talking about Boris Johnson, we don't shy away from talking about Dominic Cummings, but it can't just be a political opinion. It needs to be a joke about going to Durham, or someone's listening to us at Barnard Castle or whatever. So I think it's really good not to shy away from that stuff, and to we mentioned Theresa May, and we mention Donald Trump if there's something funny that we can do about it, or tell a story that way.
Someone here's
saying, I would say also thank you from, on behalf of me and a lot of my friends, that there was a moment that I think you and Matt Edmondson did as a little interview, just talking about being the bad guy in your friendship group during when it first started, and having lots of invitations to things, but being the guy to say, no, actually, I don't think we should do that.
Yeah.
I actually think that was a really well handled way of dealing with what could have been a bit of a tricky situation. But I would say, from our point of view, I certainly found that very helpful in terms of finding language to help kind of facilitate people's relationships through that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, Matt. It was Matt Edmondson who said, be the annoying nerd who says don't go outside type thing. But yeah, I mean, look, you can only reinforce the government's rules as well, and the rules on lockdown. So we did that to the best of our ability, and it's all very flexible as well. The world is so wild that all these things are ever changing, and the rules may have to be changed again and again as things progress. But there's, as I said at the start, there's no handbook with how to deal with this. There's no handbook to deal with someone like Donald Trump in the White House. So you have to, that is always a dialogue which is being discussed by people much higher up the BBC than me.
Someone here saying we listen to you to get away from that, so thank you. I'm going to cut. I can see lots of hands up, so I'm going to come to you in just a second. But if I get through this without putting up this slide, which might get me into trouble, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Go on.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite Instagram post from lockdown, if not ever. It's from your wife, who said, "I need new lockdown buddies," and she I know she's on the line watching this. Okay, you can take it down now. I think we've had enough of Greg's bum. It's your bum and your dog, and it really made me laugh. First of all, I wanted to know if she got into trouble for it.
No.
Second of all, she didn't.
There's a great thing with Bella and her family, is that there's no loyalty, and it's sort of anything for the joke. And I woke up and saw that. I just saw a text from my friend going, "Not okay," and like I had some sort of part in it. But that's real. That's real life, isn't it?
So one of the reasons I wanted to do it was actually I thought it was a sort of neat segue into the fact that you and Bella, but both of you are quite big and on Instagram, on social media. You've got like 1 million followers on Instagram and more than 1 million on Twitter, and you're very there and you're very influential, but you are also quite contemptuous of influencers. And I wondered if it was a sort of conscious thing that you want to sort of influence. I could see you talking about books, the Akala book that you think you were just reading, and about whether you both try and sort of influence for good in some way, and talking about mental health and that sort of thing.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, the influence.
Fun pictures.
The influence of, well, I find everything funny, first of all. So I find awful people like that really funny. So the influencer thing is like, it goes back to the, "Hey guys, today I'm working with Oral-B on this new thing," and then next week it will be, "Hey, I'm working with Outpro," and they're like, and "Oh, hi guys," whatever. So I find that sort of funny, which we would take the mick out of and do. What was it? Bella's got it's called a babyless. It's called a big hair.
Big hair. Very good.
A video of like, "Hey guys, I've just been called by the people at Babyless and I've got a big hair. Oh my god." So there's that, which I find just really funny. But those people make more money than all of us put together. They're sort of, I suppose, they're having a laugh. But yes, I think as I've got older and as I've progressed at Radio 1, my view of what it can do as a platform has changed a bit. And when I started, because I started when I was 21, which was ages ago, and it was always like, "I'm going to be on Radio 1, everyone's going to know who I am, I'm going to be able to do loads of funny things, and like it's all prank calls and like big celebrity guests and whatever." And then I think as I've progressed, I've gone, well, I need to find a new challenge in this, sort of. So I guess I've found, I don't know, ironically, I found my voice in things like that. And you realise that you can talk about slightly more serious things on an entertainment network. And that's quite a powerful thing, because if you're packing it with loads of fun stuff, people are like, "Hey, it's really, really good." And the listeners, they go with you. And there is no point to any of those shows without the listeners and their engagement. So you can flag stuff up. You can flag up mental health awareness, like you can flag up a brand new artist or whatever. And when I realised that those two things can go together, it kind of unlocked Radio 1 a bit more. So it's a roundabout way of saying, yes, it is nice to be able to introduce people to stuff. And hopefully it's never in a preachy way. I think that would be, again, a sort of abuse of my position in a way. But with a big platform, I think there's definitely a responsibility with that, with doing that breakfast show of, yes, it's got to be really funny and make people's days go quicker. But the whole point of the BBC is to tell people some interesting stuff every now and then, and to, you know, flag up like the Black Lives Matter protests a few weeks ago and George Floyd. That was an amazing moment for Radio 1 and 1 Extra to sort of join forces and have some presenters just speak so honestly. I've never heard anything like that moment that Clara was part of, when she just spoke her truth, I guess. And we were all milling around outside the studio afterwards, and she just said, I've never felt more myself on air. So it's always like it's an ongoing discovery, I guess. And you get you hopefully get better at it every single day you do it. And that's what I found was exciting for me when taking over the show. I'd done loads of other shows and I'd sort of done it for years. But when I got the breakfast show, I was like, okay, well, I've got to get better. I've got to keep getting better, because you can't ever just stand still.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to Laura and then Amy and then Fran, in that order.
Hi, sorry, I'm really excited. Sorry, I'm a massive fan of Radio 1. This is my sister.
Hi.
She's probably going to kill me.
Please don't do that. It would be bad. The video.
I'm currently studying media production at Sunderland, and we have a community radio called Spark, which I'm going to be part of.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, is there a big difference or jump between student radio to like public service or local commercial radio? Is there a big difference, kind of almost like with technology but also with audience and stuff? Is it like a massive jump, or do you kind of feel like you have some experience to carry forward to the new stuff?
I mean, I can get sacked now, which I couldn't do on student radio, that's for sure. But I try and hold close the feeling of being totally sort of fearless and just excited about it that I had when I was doing student radio. Because essentially it doesn't change. It's just you're doing a radio show, whether it's in front of 1 million people or one person, it should essentially be the same sort of thing. It should be for the listeners, and everything you come up with should be to make sure they're having a nice time and being entertained and engaged and stuff. I mean, yeah, the differences of like the pressure and stuff is of course different, and it's much more stressful when it becomes your actual job, and then you've got to try and keep doing it well in order to pay bills, which kind of is odd because it starts as your hobby and then you make your hobby into jobs, which is certainly a strange transition. But in terms of making a radio show, it should just be fun. Like, you should always find it fun coming up with stuff, because if you don't find it fun, then why the hell would the listeners find it fun, I guess. And what was the other part of your question? You said technology-wise. Oh, technology-wise, sort of, yeah. I mean, you'll have different desks and stuff at different stations, but the basics are the same everywhere. Microphone, in the old days when I started, a couple of CD players and some cart players and stuff, but it's all about doing it and having experience doing it, and they call it getting air miles. So if you have enough air miles, you can sort of graduate onto different radio stations. But as I said, you should be getting better every single time you do it. As long as you remember that you're never done, and not in a depressing way, but you'll never be like the complete radio presenter. That doesn't happen. And when you realize that, it actually becomes really exciting, and you go, right, well, I did that great show, but what can we do the next day, I suppose. Okay,
I'm going to go to Amy and then Fran, and I'm going to ask people to just kind of keep it a bit brief, because we have to go to Tony, because he's got a cricket question, and I have to promise the cricket people have their cricket moment with you. So Amy, Fran, and then Tony P and cricket stuff.
I keep seeing lots of Tailenders quotes and stuff popping up in the comments.
Yeah, there needs to be. I know that there are Tailenders people there. Don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah,
Amy and Fran. Amy first.
I don't have a question, but I just thought you might like to see my dog.
Oh,
who's there? And she's normally when I'm on Zoom calls, I'm like in the study and trying to look professional, but I listened to you in bed, so I thought. And also the dog was in bed, so she's really chilled and not bothered.
Quick shot of Barney to show similar.
Papa, come here. I'll take you up to see him quickly.
If those that don't know, I'm sure you all do know, Barney is
Barney.
a very stupid dog.
Love him.
Very, very sleepy.
He is so perfect.
Thank you very much. For
I do just have one, actually. I have one quick mental health question, if that's okay. If you've got, which is how much responsibility, you've been so brilliant about being so giving mental health air miles and being honest about where you're at, and when, even just in a basic way, like mornings when you've had a late night the night before and you're not feeling 100%, but then also I think particularly with the death of Caroline Flack, I was really impressed with how Radio 1 handled that altogether. And I know that, like, I've emailed in just saying thank you to the team for what you guys do, and you literally just get me and so many other people up in the morning. How much of that does that responsibility weigh on you, or are you able to, I don't know what you're like as a private person, are you able to just take the compliment of that, or does it rest heavily on you? And what does that feel like for you to be hearing when regulars text in with, like, their mental health stories?
It feels like we've really pushed through a barrier, and it doesn't particularly weigh heavy on me, other than I think it's a really exciting part of the job to sort of be there for listeners in that way. And it goes back to, again, the confidence of a radio station to say those sorts of things, and for it to be just part of a load of shout outs. You'd be like, oh, Barry's in the quarry doing whatever, and blah, 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 blah. And Sophie in Winchester is having a really down day. She's feeling mega anxious. Had a panic attack yesterday. That is sort of amazing that it's come to that. I mean, that's not just a Radio 1 thing. That's a global thing that we've got a lot better at talking about it. But it's really important that big broadcasters like Radio 1 and stuff do talk about that, particularly for a young audience who, a huge issue. And that's why Radio 1 can be brilliant at that sort of stuff, and really just be fronting up and talking about race, gender, mental health, and it being totally okay and acceptable to do that. But I have days where I don't want to do it. I totally have mornings where I wake up at 5 and just go, no. But I always remember within about 2 or 3 minutes that I'm lucky to do it, and all the listeners have probably been up longer than me. So I can't ever go on air at 6:30 or 7 and just go, I'm tired today, because you've had people who are on night shifts or like driving around or whatever. So I've got a rarefied life, really. So it's not, I don't see it as a massive hardship, but I do find it fascinating. I do find it, I genuinely find the listeners to the show fascinating and funny. Not all of them, some are quite mean, but mostly funny and fascinating. And the stories that you get out are brilliant, and they sort of make the show. So it actually cheers me up to just be in front of the listeners, and often a text will just make me properly laugh, and that actually makes it worthwhile getting out of bed.
Other people in the chat saying how grateful they are to you and Bella for talking about mental health. Tony, I promised I'd come to you next. I know the Tailenders crew are coming to the fore. You just had your 99th episode of Tailenders.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Tony?
Okay, hope everybody stays on, just because.
Hi, Tony.
Toolkit question. Hello, Greg. About mental health, though, just to run on from that, I think Marcus Trescothick, who was an England opener and an Ashes winner, really deserves kudos for coming forth and publishing the book he did. It must have been quite traumatic, but it was very important. But anyway, the question is, how much does cricket sledging and banter help you to be clever and funny on the radio, and vice versa? The radio help the cricket?
Weirdly, when I played proper competitive cricket at school, and then I played for county, a minor county, but when I was a kid, Hertfordshire, I was very, very shy, and I was incredibly lacking in confidence, and so would never dream of sledging anyone. because I would worry that I wouldn't be able to back it up with my technical ability. So actually, I wasn't the guy that really sledged. I think in village cricket now, because I guess Billy Big Bollocks on Radio 1, I'm probably much more ferocious when I bowl now than I was when I was actually physically better at bowling and fitter. So I was never the guy to sledge, but at school I would always sort of be doing silly voices or I would never be able to outsmart someone sort of physically or like in a sporting way, but I would always try and I guess words were kind of my tools. But yeah, that's a really great question. But I just had a horrible flashback to what I was like when I was playing cricket, and I was just intimidated more than ever. Particularly when I became sort of in late teens, I was like, this is not the game for me because I can't. There's something about. I went to pieces. Mentally, I went to pieces when I was faced with a ferocious bowling attack or a ball that was just hanging in the air. I would sort of go to pieces mentally. So I feel much more in control of a radio studio than I do on a cricket field now. It works out for the best, I guess.
Another question that was in the chat earlier, I think it was from Martin. He said, have you taken this week off because of the England Windies test?
Certainly, part of it.
There you go.
The bosses at work have been amazing with sort of saying, if you need to take a week off or whatever, just, it's totally fine. And like, just, go and do your thing, and that's good. Because as fun as it is, it's obviously very demanding, and you do want to do a good job and not let people down who are listening. So it's good that I recharged. And I looked at the calendar and thought, could be some cricket on the 8th of July, and it looks like we're going to have some. So I will be sat here watching that in a few days' time.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to go to Alex and then Simon and then Max.
Hi there. Can
Hello.
you hear me?
Hi, yes. Hi, Alex.
Hi. Well, I'm about to begin a course in broadcast journalism, and basically I love your show and I'm really interested in music, but equally I've just done a university course in politics, and I sort of feel torn between these two interests. So I was wondering whether you knew when you went into radio that it was sort of the entertainment fun side that you wanted to go into.
Certainly, because of all the things that I loved when I was growing up. So it was always comedians and comedies and comedy films and stuff. So it was always silly, fun stuff that I liked. And so that's, I guess it was following the things that I knew what to do, and the people that I really looked up to were comedians and funny people. So I did know. Radio 1 wasn't an accident, but it sort of came along at the same time, and then I did student radio and went, oh wow, you can do funny things and then play some songs that you also really like, and that just felt like a really good match.
Yeah.
So you're doing politics. So what would you? So you're basically, what you're saying is, are you going to try and do sort of entertainment programming? Might have some news for maybe a younger audience, or are you going to go and do serious journalism?
Well, that's my decision, I guess. I'm about to do a postgraduate course in journalism, in broadcast journalism, so that'll be more practical skills. But I'm interested in lots of different things. I feel that's my problem. I know you're interested in cricket and sport, and you've managed to incorporate that into your career as well, which I think is good. I was sort of wondering whether there's a niche for more light-hearted news programs in a way.
I think there are, certainly. I think there are. You have to find ways of engaging listeners in topics and themes and music, and it's the same for everything. So you have to find a way for people to be interested in the pandemic, for example, or Brexit. So there are certainly opportunities to think differently about that sort of thing. But also, I don't think necessarily making that decision now will preclude you from doing something different in, say, 5 years' time. When I started Radio 1, I always knew that I wanted to do other stuff as well. So don't feel like you will pigeonhole yourself. I think the only person who will pigeonhole you is probably you. So judging by all the people that I really respect, you can do lots of things along your career. That sort of life and careers can be quite long. So don't worry too much about it now. Just follow the things that you're finding most interesting, I guess.
Thank you, Alex. Greg, your wife wants to know, be honest, how much of our holiday will be eaten up by cricket, and did you plan it like this?
Most of it, and yes.
Great. Very quickly to Simon and Max, because we've only got 4 minutes left. Simon first and Max.
And can I have some more wine if there's any in the kitchen?
Great. Hi, Greg. I had a quick question about the celebs that you interview. I think that your appeal is that you're very genuine. We've talked about how you've been really great at opening up about mental health, but is it the same for the celebs, musicians that you interview? Do they have an entourage that wants you to hit key points about them selling their music or upcoming bits, or are they friends like Jimmy Anderson on Tailenders?
Okay, lots of great questions in that. Jimmy Anderson, I'm very proud and bursting with excitement to tell you that he's a very good friend of mine, and we've been mates for many years after he approached me years ago to do another cricket show with him, and then me and him and Swanee became really good mates, and so that's my celebrity boast. But no, me and Jimmy are really, really close mates, and me and Felix as well. We're all genuine pals. I don't think that show wouldn't work if it wasn't like that. So we catch up even when we're not doing a show together. I think that's very important with that. Celebs on the show. So this is the thing. So I've never really massively enjoyed hearing celebrity interviews, because I don't think, well, I know that not all celebrities are automatically interesting. And I've never thought that a guest equals content. So unless the guest comes on and adds something to the listener's enjoyment, I don't really bother getting them on. If it's just like, oh, I'm plugging my new book, can you just, and it's like, this is just boring. No listener is going, oh, I can't wait to hear, I'm not going to insult someone now, but you know, those sorts of books and stuff. There has to be some reason to get them on. And I suppose when they play along with the show and they do unpopular opinion or whatever. So yes, obviously guests come on because they're promoting a film. Like we had Jake Gyllenhaal on doing Spider-Man, and that's the pretense of it. Like, you know, you have to mention that he's in this film, but wine has arrived. But he really mucked in and he got involved with unpopular opinion and all the rest of it. So we only ever, like anything, we only ever do a bit on the show where we think, this will be really funny, and our intentions are the listeners will really like it. So that's my approach to guests, which is don't just get them on for the sake of it. We'd rather just do an extra song in a half hour if we don't have anything planned. Don't just get a guest on for the sake of it. So I hope that answers your question, Simon.
Thank you. And Max, last words to you.
Oh yeah, hi Greg. So I just want to say I listen to your show pretty much every day. I love listening to your show. I've been listening since back when you're doing Drive Time.
Oh, nice, thanks.
And I was going to ask, is there any chance that the old Greg James podcast might return for a one-off special? Because I absolutely love such.
Oh, with Chris Smith, my very, very
yes. So Chris Smith with the news.
Chris Smith with the news. Yes, Chris used to do the news on my afternoon show, and we did a podcast which. Yeah, it was kind of weird and culty and silly and full of silly voices and games and all the rest of it, which then sort of spawned into me and Chris writing Kid Normal together. That was our kind of outlet for that. I think
quick plug, we should say that the 5th one is out now and it came out in lockdown. It's the last Kid Normal. Quick plug for the Kid Normal because we haven't done that.
No, it's fine. This has been a great experience. Yeah, we will. I'm sure we'll do a podcast or some radio again in the future. Certainly. In fact, we are writing a brand new children's book at the moment over Zoom, and we've done a couple of socially distanced, safe brainstorms. But with that, we were thinking there aren't many podcasts that review children's literature, and that is certainly something which isn't really done by many big publications. They don't seem to get the column inches that adult fiction, for example, gets. So there's certainly a world in which me and Chris Smith will be doing fun behind a microphone again. So yes.
That sounds brilliant. I wanted that to be the last one, but however, there is a campaign in the chat for me to ask Isabella's question because she can't raise her hand. So this really is the last one. I'm not sure how to raise my hand, but I have a quick question. I currently do hot radio. I've done for a year, along with running a podcast with my friend called Car Chats. Greg, what route would you suggest I take next into introducing myself into the radio industry?
So they do podcasts already and a radio show?
I think so, yeah. Running a podcast, yeah.
Well, it's certainly tricky. The best way is to build a fan base with that podcast that makes it either successful on its own, or for a broadcaster to come along and be like, we need this. We need that take on this. Did you say it was car based?
Car chat. I think
car chat.
Car. I think
you need to make
Isabella. You can
make yourself
cars.
So make it seem so obvious that you need to be put somewhere else, that someone comes along and goes, right, we need that show, or we're going to fund another few episodes, or we're going to turn this into a TV idea or something. So I guess it's about just building a fan base and building listener loyalty, and I suppose if you want to make that your job, make sure it's monetized. I don't want to patronize you to say it's not. It might be. I'm sorry, I don't know the facts, but it's all about, with any of these sorts of jobs, you can't ever go into it thinking this is going to be my career. You've got to start it the other way, which is, I've got a really fun idea and I really enjoy this, and then hopefully it takes off. There's a lot of luck involved, and there's no getting away from that. You'd be mad to say that you didn't need a big slice of luck. So, but if you put yourself in a position where it would be a ridiculous thing not to give you more podcasts, or have a big advertiser or a big podcast, platform to host your stuff, then I think that would be the next stage. And it's all about, and it is cynical to a certain extent. Instagram followers, and what's your YouTube offering? Like, what does it look like? What's the for the want of a best phrase, and the phrase that I hate, what's the brand of it? Like, why is that going to be the defining podcast about cars, I suppose?
Thank you for that, and thank you for running on. And Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening. I have learnt a lot, not least that you would wear a bird costume, that you think everyone looks better with big hair, that your unpopular opinion is that the Avengers film is a waste of all the talent in them, but also what you think about, using your platform for good, and all that advice you've given to our young radio podcast members about how they could get into radio. I know that's obviously been a theme of the night, and I know everyone is so grateful for you to take your time to do that. So thank you. And also thank you just mostly for the fun you've brought us through lockdown, but just generally, you always seem like you're having such a good time, which I think is why people love you. So thank you. Yeah, someone's saying in the chat, you've uplisted us all. And that's
good. I mean, I feel like these jobs are fun. So life is short. So I always feel like, let's just go and do something stupid on the show. And what I am really, and thanks for having me on this, and what's really amazing is when I do chat to young radio people and they're still interested. Like this was a medium that was supposed to be written off 15 years ago. I mean, even 10 years ago on Radio 1, people were like, radio's dead. And it's not. Podcasts are, look at the deals that are being done with people on podcasts and stuff. Like look at the numbers that people listen to it. So it's the most, I've always been fascinated with it, and I'm really pleased that it's, I guess, evolving. But it's because it's a simple medium, and it really is very flexible and spontaneous, and that's why I think people love it so much. So it's really heartening to see that there are people that are under 18 who are still not only listening to it but actually want to do it, which is great. So
the age range of your fans on here is incredible to see.
Yeah, it's fun. It's weird to see, isn't it? It's good.
Yeah, from the kids and the cricket lovers and the books, and it's just brilliant. So thank you very, very much for that. I didn't even get to talk to you about how the BBC puts pressure on you to bring in the young people, but we can see that you already are, and you are doing such a great job.
Well, I mean, I can go on for a couple of minutes long.
That is my last question to you, which is just because anyone else who wants to go, you should go. But my last question is, do you feel responsible for bringing in young people to the BBC?
Again, like whenever we come up with something on the show, you've just got to go with your instincts and do stuff that you think is good. When you start, the starting point of an idea shouldn't be a 15-year-old will like this. That is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. And it's always been a big sort of pet peeve, as our earlier sort of questioner said, of mine, which is you can't just say a 15-year-old likes this, a 20-year-old likes this. It's nonsense. You've got to come up with what you think is the best stuff, and it's an imprecise science. It is. You can't try and do a show for 15-year-olds, because what 15-year-old wants that? You just want. The way I approach it is you want something funny with music of artists that is popular with, like people who like pop music, and that's not just 15-year-olds, that's 50-year-olds, that's loads of people who love pop culture and staying connected with what's happening, like new stuff. So I don't really feel that pressure, because you just have to do the thing you think is fun. And I don't know if that's a good answer, but I really don't get bogged down in that, because you will go mad. Because if you start going, right, the worst thing I think the Radio 1 ever did was to say, if you're over 30, stop listening.
Yeah.
That just makes it feel unwelcoming. It doesn't matter what age you are, really. You should, if you enjoy a thing, enjoy the thing. But we certainly try and target it, I suppose, like at an imaginary 20-year-old, I guess. I don't know. But with that, you hopefully have some kids that are like, oh, that's really like slightly out there stuff. And then you've got people who are maybe 40 plus who are like, oh, that's really, I remember what it was like on my first date or whatever. You know what I mean? So I don't think that we get too stressed with that kind of thing.
Thank you very much, Greg. Thanks for squeezing down. Thanks for running over. Thank you for everyone that joined in. As is usual, we can't clap you off, so we awkward wave you goodbye. We wish you a lovely couple of weeks off. Oh, look, there's some people doing clapping emoji. We wish you a lovely couple of weeks off watching the cricket and having a lovely rest.
Thank you very much, everybody.
I hope you managed to sleep in.
Yeah,
the body clock doesn't wake you up.
I am very, very good at sleeping. So that is why this show is a nightmare for me, because I love staying up late and I hate getting up. Apart from that, it's a dream job.
Congratulations again. Okay,
Cheers,
thanks, Greg. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.